As we pick up with the class here, the Apocalypse of Jesus Christ, just want to quickly do a review of what we've covered so far so that it is a refresher as well as kind of sets the context for what we'll cover this morning. At the beginning, we looked at how, in the introduction, this title for the class, the Apocalypse of Jesus Christ. Apocalypse means revealing or revelation. It's not to hide things, it's to reveal them, to unveil them. That's the whole purpose of the book, to reveal. And it's sent to the 7 churches in Asia Minor at that time, but they represented the entire church age, all churches. Then in chapter 1, the very first words, the Apocalypse of Jesus Christ, revealing of Jesus Christ. And so in chapter 1, you see this detailed description of a vision of Jesus that John has. But then if you look through the entire book, you see over 20 names and descriptions of Jesus. And so it truly is the revelation of Jesus Christ. And then there are specific letters written to these 7 churches. And the first one, Ephesus, the church that lost its first love. Smyrna, the church that was persecuted. Pergamum, the church that allowed false teaching. Thyatira, the church that permitted immorality. And then in chapter 3, you have the last 3 churches. The church at Sardis, which was known as the dead church. The church at Philadelphia, the faithful church, and then Laodicea, the final church, the 7th, which was known as lukewarm. Then in chapter 4, John is called up to heaven, and there he sees this vision of God's throne, this amazing vision of the throne and the 4 living creatures around it. You have the rainbow above it. You have the 24 elders around it, and he's just blown away, and there is worship as well before God's throne. Then in chapter 5, there is this scroll with 7 seals, and it is seen that there is only one in the entire universe who is worthy to take the scroll and to break its seals, and that is the Lamb of God, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. Jesus steps forward, and he takes the scroll out of the Father's hand. Then in chapter 6, he starts to break those seals, and we go through the first 6 seals in chapter 6. And then in chapter 7, before the 7th seal is broken, you have 144,000 Jewish witnesses that are sealed and set apart as witnesses during this time. And then you get kind of a peek at the tribulation saints that will result from the witnesses, the 144,000 witnesses, and they are in white robes and they worship as well. Then in chapter 8, we now begin the 7 trumpets which come out of the 7th seal. The first trumpet blows, and hail and fire mixed with blood pours down. Second trumpet blows, and this something like a mountain crashes into the oceans. Third trumpet blows, and this star crashes into the rivers and springs called wormwood, makes it bitter. Fourth trumpet blows, and a third of the sun, moon, and stars are darkened. Then in chapter 9, the 5th trumpet blows, and you have these locusts that arise, and they sting like scorpions. The 6th trumpet blows, and you have this demonic army of 200 million, and they kill a third of mankind. Then in chapter 10, this great angel comes down with and it's either a great angel or it's Jesus himself, and his right foot is in the sea, his left foot is on land, and he speaks in a thundering voice. But John is told not to record that. Instead, he is told to take the scroll and to eat it, and it is sweet, but then it becomes bitter. Chapter 11, 2 witnesses are set apart to be God's great witnesses during this time, and they have great power to work miracles and even to put to death those who try to harm them. And then the 7th trumpet blows. There's lightning, there's thunder, there's earthquake, and there's an announcement that the kingdom of the earth has become the kingdom of Jesus Christ. Because with the blowing of the 7th trumpet, we now have the 7 bowls, which are the end. The mystery is revealed of how God brings about his kingdom on earth. So that's where we left off. Here is just again a reference as far as the timeline. Revelations 1 through 3 is the church on earth, and then in chapter 4, the church is raptured and caught up to heaven. In Revelations 4 and 5, we see what is there in heaven, the vision that John has, and then we are back here on the earth going through the tribulation and seeing what these judgments are in Revelation 6 through 18. So we'll pick up today and look at Revelation 12 through 15, and we'll focus on the dragon, or some of the things that we'll look at are the dragon, the Antichrist, the false prophet, and even the mark of the beast. So we'll go to chapter 12 and start with this sign of this woman. It says in chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, "And a great sign appeared in heaven, a woman, clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. She was pregnant and was crying out in birth pains in the agony of giving birth." Now, again, this is the Great Tribulation. The tribulation is a 7-year period, but the last 3.5 years is the Great Tribulation. You can see this term in Matthew 24:21 as well as Revelation 7:14. The Great Tribulation, the worst time. In fact, in Matthew 24:21, as well as 3 Old Testament passages, it's called the time of the worst suffering in all of history. And obviously, if it's the worst, it can all be must all be talking about the same time. It's this, the last 3.5 years of the tribulation. Here it says a great sign is seen. Okay, a sign obviously points to something, and this sign points to the great conflict that has taken place kind of throughout history, and it involves Israel, Satan, and Jesus. And it says it is a sign in heaven or space. Remember, there's levels of the heavens, the 3 heavens. And it could be saying this because the symbols that are used are found in the heavens, sun, moon, and stars, which it uses. Or it also could be because something will happen with the alignment of the sun, moon, and the stars at some point in the future as well, which in reference to this, I would encourage you to look up what happens in 2017 next year. It's fascinating. But as far as just the signs being symbols, the woman is Israel, which is referred to at least a couple times in the Old Testament as the wife of God. In Isaiah 54:5 and 6, as well as in Jeremiah 3:20. The sun represents the glory of God on Israel, because Israel was his chosen nation. And Israel, it says, is clothed with the sun. It's interesting, this also connects the woman with Israel in Joseph's dream. If you remember in Genesis 37, when Joseph has that dream, the sun is his father Jacob, or Israel. His name was changed to Israel. The moon represents God's covenant relationship with Israel, because all the 7 feasts that God gave to Israel, that thing that distinguishes them from every other nation, that was all based on the moon's cycles. So the moon kind of represents that covenant relationship with him. The crown of 12 stars, the 12 tribes. The birth pains. Now, throughout the Old Testament, the Israelites were waiting for their Messiah. And as they waited, they endured lots of years of mistreatment and oppression and persecution. And so you could say the prophecies about the Messiah are that pregnancy period, the oppression from the other nations, that is the birth pains, and the Messiah, of course, is the child. Now, verses 3 and 4, "And another sign appeared in heaven. Behold, a great red dragon with 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his head 7 crowns. His tail swept down 1/3 of the stars of heaven and cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she bore her child, he might devour it." The dragon here is Satan. It tells us very clearly in verse 9, same chapter, that it's Satan. The color red likely implies blood, because Satan only seeks to destroy. Like in John 8:44, he seeks to steal, kill, and destroy. And it says he has 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns on the heads. And this description of the dragon, which is Satan, is actually very similar to the way that the beast is described, or the Antichrist, in the next chapter, in chapter 13. And the reason is because they're both working very closely together in what they are trying to accomplish in the tribulation. But as far as the 7 heads and what they represent 2 things. And we're told exactly what they represent in Revelation 17, verses 9 and 10. Number 1, they represent the 7 mountains or hills, most likely of Rome, because Rome will be the center of political power during the tribulation. Number 2, it says in the same passage in Revelation 17 that the 7 heads also represent the 7 consecutive kings or world empires that ruled during biblical times, which Satan greatly influenced. They are Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, and then the restored Roman Empire in the future during the tribulation. Those are the 7. And this is why the crowns here are on the 7 heads in Revelation 12, because it's describing Satan, and Satan was greatly influencing those evil empires against God's people, against the nation of Israel. The 10 horns in this vision represent the 10 kings or leaders of the restored Roman Empire in the tribulation period, in the future. There will be a coalition of 10 kings in this future Roman kingdom to come. In Revelation 17:12, it tells us about this. And you'll notice in the next chapter, when it talks about the Antichrist, also called the beast, and his kingdom, the crowns are now on the horns, the 10 horns, because the Antichrist is leading those 10 kings or leaders of that restored Roman Empire. So Satan was behind the 7 world empires throughout biblical history. That's why in this vision in chapter 12, the crowns are on the heads. But the Antichrist or beast will be in charge of the restored Roman confederacy or empire, and that's why in the next chapter the crowns are on the 10 horns. So that's one distinguishing feature in these two similar descriptions. And then it says his tail swept a third of the stars. Here the term stars refers to angels. You see the same thing in Job 38:7, as well as in the book of Revelation chapter 9 verse 1. Sometimes it's used, the star, to refer to angels, and here it's referring to the fallen angels, the ones that rebelled with Satan when he was cast out of heaven, which you can read about in Isaiah 14 as well as Ezekiel 28. It says that so that when she bore the child, he might devour it. Satan waited for Jesus the Messiah to be born because he wanted to destroy the Messiah. He tried to kill Jesus before Jesus could save mankind. Remember what happens in Matthew 2, how Herod has all the babies killed? Satan certainly was behind that. Then in verses 5 and 6, it says, she gave birth to a male child, one who was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron. But her child was caught up to God and his throne, and the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared by God in which she is to be nourished for 1,260 days. Okay, of course, the male child is Jesus, born out of the nation of Israel from Mary, who is to rule all the nations. It says he's caught up. So Satan failed in his plan to destroy the Messiah, and so once his time he accomplished what he was here for, he ascended back up to heaven where he came from. It says a woman fled into the wilderness. If you look in Matthew 24, it says that at the midpoint of the tribulation, the 3.5-year mark, there's going to be abominations set up in the holy temple, which is going to make it desolate. And at that point, Israel is going to have to flee because the Antichrist has turned against Israel. And so when you look at this, you see that verse 5 talks about Christ ascending to heaven, which we know happened 2,000 years ago or so. And then it jumps all the way over 2,000 years into the future to the midpoint of the tribulation here, and when Israel flees into the wilderness because of the persecution of the Antichrist. So just to make that reference of that time gap that's in these two verses. And then it says for 1,260 days, or 3.5 years. You'll see it put in 4 different ways. This 3.5 years is listed, so that it's very clear this is the time frame for the great tribulation. But God will nourish and take care of Israel during this time. Satan will try to kill all the Jews because he knows Scripture says that the Jews who survive to the end of the tribulation, they will all be saved. They will all accept their Messiah. So he wants to wipe them out. Tells us about this in Zechariah 12, as well as Romans 11. Then verses 7 to 9, we look at how it describes the dragon, Satan, being thrown down. It says, now war arose in heaven, Michael and his angels fighting against the dragon. And the dragon and his angels fought back, but he was defeated. And there was no longer any place for them in heaven. And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent who's called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. So though Satan and his angels have been cast out of God's immediate presence in the third heaven, they still have access to sky and space, and Satan is still allowed to accuse, or he still does accuse the saints and Christians before God. You can read about that in Job, chapter 1, verse 6, as well as Revelation 12, verse 10. Same chapter in a couple verses. However, it says that there will be a great war in heaven. So somewhere about midpoint of the tribulation or shortly before it, there will be a great war somewhere in space. Now, Michael here is the chief or prince over the angels. It tells us this in Daniel 10:13, as well as chapter 12, verse 1. And Satan and his angels are, of course, no match for Michael and God's angels, and so they will be thrown down to this earth. In fact, Michael and Satan or Lucifer were created at the same time, so they know each other. And this isn't the first time that there's been conflict between them. You can read about it in Daniel 10, as well as Jude verse 9. So you could say this war has a lot of bad blood in it as well. We don't know, of course, how angels fight or what exactly is going to happen. Maybe someday we will. But the important thing is Satan loses. And so it says the dragon, the serpent, the devil, Satan, the deceiver. 5 names make it extremely clear who's being talked about. He is thrown down to the earth. Then it says in verses 10 and 11, and I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come, for the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them day and night before our God. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they love not their lives even unto death. So you hear this loud voice, which is basically just a sudden burst of celebration heard from God's presence, which is because finally Satan and his demons are cast out of the heavens and can no longer accuse God's people, God's saints and Christians. And it talks about salvation, power, kingdom, and authority. Again, finally, after thousands of years, the heavens are cleansed of Satan and his demons, so that only Jesus and his kingdom rule there. And this is just a start, because here you see Satan and his demons are cast out of the heavens, and in 3.5 short years from this point, Satan and his demons will also be cast out of the earth as well when Jesus comes back to establish his millennial kingdom at the second coming, at the close of the tribulation. And it says that they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb. Of course, Jesus fought and defeated Satan at the cross. But it also says by the word of their testimony. They are also victorious because of their faith in Christ. That gives them the victory because of what the Lamb did. And it uses that phrase, even unto death. Christ is more important to saints than their very own lives. Especially that will be the case during the tribulation. Then verse 12, it says, therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them, but woe to you, O earth and sea, for the devil has come down to you in great wrath, because he knows that his time is short. So you got rejoice, but also woe. The results of the war is great news for the angels in the heavens, but at the same time, it is, of course, horrible news for anyone who's here on earth. It's great news for the angels in heaven because they don't have to deal with Satan and his demons anymore. But it's terrible news for anyone on earth because Satan is now restricted to the earth. He's come down to you, it says. Satan is not only confined to the earth now, like never before, but he's also extremely angry since he was cast out of the heavens and because he knows his time is very short. 3.5 years at the most at this point. Verses 13 to 15 talk about the dragon and what he does here on this earth once he's thrown down. It says, and when the dragon saw that he had been thrown down to the earth, he pursued the woman who had given birth to the male child. But the woman was given the 2 wings of the great eagle so that she might fly from the serpent into the wilderness to the place where she is to be nourished for a time and times and half a time. The serpent poured water like a river out of his mouth after the woman to sweep her away with the flood. And as you see, it says that Satan pursued the woman. Obviously, he is now putting his focus on Israel. That's the woman again, trying to destroy Israel, trying to kill them now that he has been thrown down to the earth. This is God's chosen people. He has a plan for them. Satan wants to ruin it. It says the woman was given the 2 wings of a great eagle. Okay, wings symbolize protection, putting wings over, and also deliverance, carrying up, because an eagle soars high above everything that's happening below. And it kind of tells us that in Psalm 91:4 as well as Isaiah 40:31. But this is interesting. In Exodus 19 verse 4, it says, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. So just as God miraculously protected and provided for the Israelites in the wilderness for 40 years, he will also do the same, miraculously protect and provide for the Jews in the wilderness for 3.5 years, the last half of the tribulation. And it uses this phrase, time, times, and half a time. Again, another way to say 3.5 years. Time, 1 year, times 2 years, that's 3, and half a time, 3.5 years. And at the end of it all, and you can also see this phrase, time, times, and half a time, in Daniel 7 and in Daniel 12 as well. And at the end of it all, 1/3 of the Jews will be protected, preserved, and will survive to the end of the tribulation to welcome the Messiah, as it says in Zechariah 13, verse 8. And then here he says that the dragon tries to pour out water, possibly to dislodge the Jews from their hiding place in the wilderness in this last 3.5 years. So Satan and his followers in some way use water to try to cause problems for the Israelites, or for the Jews. But look at what it says in verse 16 and 17. It says, but the earth came to the help of the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed the river that the dragon had poured from his mouth. Then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus. And he stood on the sand of the sea. So the earth, it says, came to the help, or God, who controls the earth, caused the earth to open up, and the water falls in, possibly by an earthquake. God, again, takes care of and protects Israel during this time. And then he goes off in anger to attack the rest of her offspring. Who's that? The saints, the believers on the earth. It says in Galatians 3:29 that we also are Abraham's seed, because we are his descendants through faith. As we know, many saints and believers will be persecuted during this time, and it's talking about that here with what the dragon is doing. And he stood on the sand of the sea, it says at the end here. And you remember, the sea represents all the nations and the peoples of the earth, and so it's just a reminder that the dragon and what he's doing will have influence all over the world during this time. So a quick review of what we covered in chapter 12. It's about the woman who is Israel and the male child, which is the Messiah, and how Satan has tried to kill her as well as the child. But, of course, it did not work according to Satan's plan. And then there's this great war in the heavens. And at the midpoint, Satan and his demons are cast down to the earth. And then they pursue the woman once again and the rest of her offspring.